All right, here we are. I've been looking forward to this ever since sort of the day began when I figured out what I wanted to do this evening. I appreciate anybody and everybody that's tuning in tonight or check us out later. Today is December the 5th, 2022. It is the 89th anniversary of the repeal of prohibition, the repeal of the 18th Amendment. And that, of course, was what's considered the great experiment that America did when we tried to make alcohol an illegal substance for a few years. And we know how that went. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the history. Wanted to talk a little bit about alcohol, the things that it did, have a little fun with it, have a little drink. I got a drink and a cigar here ready. And I would like everybody that tunes in, even if it's late, even if it's not live, grab your drink and celebrate the repeal of prohibition. And in my opinion, and we'll talk more about this later, but in my opinion, a little bit of the reaffirmation of some personal liberty there in 1933. And we can apply that to some of today, and we'll get to that too. I've got a special guest coming up at about 9:45. He's scheduled to check in with me. And I got a buddy ready to hang out with us here in a little bit too. Yeah, Joe. Joe's listening. I'll put you on the stream here in just a little bit. But you need a drink, dude. You're going to have to get a drink. My buddy Joe, and we'll talk more about Joe here in a little bit. Okay, he's got something. He's ready to go. He's showing me. So we're gonna celebrate the repeal of prohibition. Like I said, it's the 89th anniversary, and yeah, Chad, you say that hello, dirty old man, and I'll say it too. And there's not too many times that series of words will come out of my mouth. So it is especially when you're also saying hello, baby doll to someone else. It just gets a little. It gets a little. What's the word I'm looking for? Island of Misfit Toys sounding here.
Wait until you run into one of those names that the first name is Dick, D-I-C-K, with the middle initial N, period, and then the last name cider is an apple cider, and then you say it fast.
Right,
so,
yeah.
You get ready for some of those. They're out there, I promise you.
and everyone welcome Ironton Auditor too. Ironton Auditor is someone I've known through a mutual friend, Legicator. And he's my biggest cheerleader lately to get back up into the YouTube world. I gave it a shot a few years ago, and I'm back giving it a good shot. And he's been a cheerleader, and he's introduced me to several other people that are becoming friends. And I'm learning that when you do this live stream, you need some help in order to do it well. And Ironton Auditor is somebody that is known for and is very happy to help out from what I've experienced so far. And he's got a crap ton more experience than I've got. So anyways, really wanted to say thank you to him for being here. He'll have to bug out on us in a little bit, but he should be able to get us going. And then I've got Ironton Auditor here, Captain Chad. Is going to be helping out with some stuff too. And so I got a little bit of things lined up, almost like a miniature variety show here tonight. And like I said, I got a special guest from Whiskey University showing up. He's supposed to call in at 9:45. So at 9:45, we got Colonel Craig Duncan calling in. And I think he's one of the founders of Whiskey University. And for those of you that don't know, Whiskey University, I signed up for and started becoming a student, about a year and a half ago now, I guess. And got my Bachelor of Science degree through there. Now, it's not a real university, and it's not a real degree, but the template of the way they run their school is as if it were a university. And it's connected to several other whiskey and bourbon organizations as well. For instance, the Bourbon Brigade. The Bourbon Brigade also has a ranking system of how much you've learned and how much you've done in the whiskey bourbon world. And in that system, it's a military structure. So Colonel Duncan isn't a military colonel. He is a Bourbon Brigade colonel. And that still has quite a bit of weight in its respective world, of course. And so he's the guy that took me through all my classes, getting me certified to teach classes. And now I do that. So we'll talk more about that too. And then I got a little bit of history on some Prohibition era, some fun stuff, and some of the stuff that actually affects us, still today, remnants of Prohibition left behind. And then we'll talk maybe a little bit of Constitution and a little bit of present day and how this all applies to us. So anyways, I've been excited to get it going today ever since I was reminded that today was the 89th anniversary because as you can see behind me, whiskey has become a significant part of my life. not to mention just my personal life. And no, I'm not alcoholic. I go many days in a row without touching anything at all, and then I may drink for a couple days, or there may be a few days in a row for a couple weeks. I'm sipping on something while I watch TV, and then I may not for a while. Switch to craft beer for a little bit, and all kinds of stuff. So no, this is mostly two sources behind me, and you can't see all of it. That's about 2/3 you're looking at, maybe a little right around there. And so anyways, this is mostly stuff I bought for the classes I went through.
I'm going to have to come and visit you, I think.
You are more than welcome. You're more than welcome, Ironton Auditor. And some of the stuff you can't see in detail. If it looks really high end, if you can spy it on your screen and it looks really expensive, odds are my buddy that I'm going to bring on here with us in a little bit, odds are he's the one that bought it. So most of the it's still considered high end by your average drinker. But if it's $80 and below, I bought it. And if it's $80 and above, my buddy Joe bought it. So I got a lot of stock back here that's his. And for whatever reason, he likes storing it at my house. So there's about 200 bottles of whiskey and other kinds of.
What was that gentleman's name?
He'll be on in a little bit. His name's Joe. He's going to be up here.
Joe, I was going to say, he sounds like a good friend. I'm going to have to make him one of mine. I've got some room on my shelf.
Yeah, he's a damn good friend. Joe's a damn good friend. Chad knows him really well, and Joe's one of the best humans I've ever met in my life. It takes a while for people to figure that out. I'll let him comment on that here in a minute, but it takes a little while for people to figure that out. Joe's a unique guy, probably one of the best hearts I've ever met in my life. So anyways, we'll be having him on in a minute. So I'm just going to give a brief verbal for people that, especially those that tune in later and may not understand what prohibition is. I'm constantly amazed. Hold on here. Oh, I just got an invitation to a whiskey class. I'm constantly amazed at how little history people know. And so I really want to give just a brief history of what prohibition was. So in the early 1900s, there's Colonel Craig. He's in the backstage area. We'll have you on here in just a second. But prohibition was basically in the early 1900s. You had a combination of progressive ideology, which was new out of Europe, and very, very pushed in the 1890s through a lot of intellectuals here in America. And it rose to the level of, we had Teddy Roosevelt, which was the first progressive candidate for president. Tony Roosevelt. Who's that guy? Teddy Roosevelt was the first progressive candidate for president. So the progressive movement had a lot of clout at the time, combined with the religious right, what we would call the religious right today, that was very much against drinking. And then you also had sort of the modern, it was sort of progressive-y as well, rise of sociology and those studies, psychology, sociology. And they were talking a lot about, the domestic violence, the way we would say it today, a lot of beating on the women, supposedly. I mean, I don't know the exact statistics. So they got a lot of political support for, let's get rid of alcohol. It's this horrible demon. And they got enough states to pass a constitutional amendment. So at that point, once the amendment's passed, there's no court can say, well, that's unconstitutional and you can't make it illegal. So they passed the amendment. Then they passed a law to actually enforce the amendment called the Volstead Act. And the Volstead Act is what gave government the machinery for enforcing this illegality that alcohol now found itself on the other side of. It's now illegal instead of legal. So you had all kinds of things came out of that. And it's amazing. It's an amazing part of American history. And then after a few years of saying this ain't working, they repealed that with the 19th Amendment. And that's what we're here to celebrate tonight. So there are still dry counties and prohibited counties. That's true, Fubar. And thanks for being here, by the way. But that's local control. And I'm way more okay with local control than I am. Well, hey, Ironton Auditor, get out there and do something about it. Yeah, Jack. Well, Colonel Craig here should be able to have some good information about the dry county that Jack Daniels is in. I'm sure he's got a lot of good info for us. So I'm going to go ahead. He's here. He's already here waiting on me. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him into the stream. and introduce you guys and hear what he has to say about today. So let me get him here. Hey, Colonel Craig, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Tom, and yourself?
Good, good. I hear you great. That's good. And I guess you heard a little bit of the intro there.
I did at that. What a great topic, and you're doing a fantastic job.
Absolutely. Would you do me a favor and
Yes.
introduce yourself for the audience?
Sure. My name's Colonel Craig Duncan. I'm the president and founder of Whiskey University, founded in 2009, and we currently have about 250 instructors in now 47 states and 5 Canadian provinces. And we like spreading the word about bourbon and whiskey to anybody that'll listen to us.
Right. Now, do we have Mexico yet? Nobody in Mexico yet?
Nobody in Mexico, but the board of directors will not let us go there as yet. They're trying to keep until we get a little more filtered in the United States and Canada. We do have somebody in Puerto Rico starting in January.
Awesome.
But they don't want to mess with the exchange rate quite yet.
Okay. Yeah, exchange rate and other things. So you are actually, when you sent out on what app is it we use? Telegram? Is that what we use as a group?
Yes, we have 7 different regional Telegram channels, and each part of the country. In your case, I believe you're in the Mid-Atlantic area.
You put me in Mid-Atlantic and another one.
Midwest.
Midwest, right.
Midwest because of Ohio and Kentucky, and
yep.
Mid-Atlantic because of West Virginia. You happen to split your time between all 3 states, don't you?
I do. I mean, I can see 2 of them from where I'm at, and if I go about a mile or 2 up the road, I can see West Virginia at the same time. So
fantastic.
Yeah, that's the crowd you're talking to mostly tonight. Everyone that's live right now, I think, is a local to me.
Okay.
So just to get you a little, I haven't talked to you about this other than a text today. I did some YouTube a few years ago, and it was 4 Boxes of Liberty, and it was about in history there was a politician in the 1820s that had a slogan talking about the 4 Boxes of Liberty. Now, the politician, his name is almost nothing in history, but that concept that he used in his campaign was we protect our liberty with the soapbox first, the ballot box second, the jury box third, and the cartridge box fourth. And please use in that order is the way it's always expressed. So I did that, and I gave history lessons on what those meant, and then I would tie some current events into those 4 boxes was the goal. But COVID hit and things got a little wonky and crazy, and I let it fall. And recently, I've got a good buddy who is Leducator. He's in the chat. He can't be on tonight because he's a local police captain, and he's working right now. So he really couldn't be on, or he would be here with us. But anyways, he kind of started poking me in the ribs to get going again. So here I am. Just started the channel up a little over a week ago, and you sent me that meme today in Telegram saying, celebrate the repeal day. And I thought, man, this would be a great show to talk about the repeal of the 18th Amendment and
Sure.
and why we needed to repeal it. Why would we do that, right? And so many people don't know very much history. So we had a person commented right before I brought you on about how there are still too many dry counties, and then somebody, let's see, Fubar, his name's Fubar, and he said where Jack Daniels is distilled is in a dry county. So you're not far from there, are you?
Not far at all. Just under an hour. And
so can you give us a little bit of the idea of why Jack Daniels would be in a dry county? How's that work?
Well, first of all, it has more to do with the state of Tennessee than anything else. The state of Tennessee declared prohibition 10 years before the rest of the country.
That's
in
right.
1910 instead of 1920, and stayed in it 5 years after the rest of the country came out in 1933. They prolonged it until 1938. So things were dry here in Tennessee. And when the legislature finally passed the law to overturn prohibition in Tennessee, a gentleman by the name of Lem Motlow, the second proprietor of Jack Daniels, who hailed from Lynchburg, Tennessee, was able to get the legislature to overturn prohibition, but with one condition, that they would allow each one of the counties to decide themselves if they wanted to be able to serve alcohol or not. Well, at that time, he didn't have a whole lot of choices, and he took what he could get from the legislature. He was a state senator at the time, by the way. And in order to get liquor served in your county here in Tennessee, you actually had to have 2/3 of the people by referendum pass on a ballot referendum. And here in the Bible Belt, that just didn't happen. And then fortunately in 2009, some 70 years later, the state of Tennessee passed a jobs bill with a distillery amendment on it that basically said, hey, if your county did pass at some point in time liquor by the drink, which is served in restaurants, and package store, which is your liquor stores, then instead of having 2/3 of the people vote, a simple 1 vote majority in your county commission could allow a distillery to be built in your county. And now 43 of the 95 counties do in fact have a distillery, but up until 2015, only 3 states in the entire country had 40% of their counties that were still dry: Tennessee, Kentucky, believe it or not, and Arkansas. So, of course, those have been coming down fairly rapidly over the last 7 years. But prior to 2015, there were bootleggers in Kentucky that would go from one county to another selling in dry counties.
Well, I've always found it as a history guy, I've always found it amazing. Well, as a history guy that grew up in Southern Ohio, right next to Kentucky, grew up Baptist. Well, I didn't grow up Baptist. Actually, I chose to be Baptist when I was 14 all by myself. So was raised in that. And but how those two things coincide right side by side in our culture. Forget the religious part, forget the political part. Just as us as a culture, I just finished a book, and I actually plan on doing a podcast about the book. I don't know. I know you like history a lot. I don't know. You know who David Hackett Fisher is?
The name again?
David Hackett Fisher. He's okay. He's in the history. He's a professor and a big historian, and he wrote Washington's Crossing and a few more slightly more popularized books. But he wrote a book which isn't very popular called Albion's Seed, and I plan on doing a show or a series of shows about pieces of that. Anyways, it's about the 4 major migrations from England to America. The first one being the Puritans, the second one being the what he calls the Cavaliers of the Tidewater, Virginia area, the Quakers of Western New Jersey and Eastern Pennsylvania, and the fourth one, this is where I'm headed, is what we now call the Scots-Irish. He called them the Borderlands people because it's Southern Scotland, Northern England, and Northern Ireland. That group of outcasts of all 3 cultures. And they were just beaten upon by war after war after war. Anyways, they saw an opportunity, came to America, and became what he calls here the backcountry folk. And that's, of course, where you're from. That's where I'm from. And I think everybody in this podcast, whether they like it or not, it sits in like a bathtub of that culture. And I got another book I got to talk about called Born Fighting that's about the same thing. But that culture, how it's got that, Charlie Daniels called it that long-haired country boy. That prayer and Bible and a bottle of Jack Daniels in your hand and all of that coinciding how you end up with a Tennessee and a Kentucky, known worldwide for their whiskey, but yet half of their states are dry. It's kind of crazy.
It really is. It's an amazing chemistry here, but it works. And, you know, here
Yeah.
in the state of Tennessee, the distilleries actually pay $20 million every week in federal and state taxes. Every week.
Every week,
And
$20
a
million.
large part of that is Jack Daniels.
How much is that?
A large part of it,
Just
almost
a large
3/4 of it, yeah. But Lynchburg to this day is still dry, except for the one little exception that the Jack Daniels distillery carved out by being able to sell their bottles in a bottle shop at the distillery.
Really? So they got a little exception to be able to sell at the distillery.
Yes. About 10, maybe 12 years ago.
Wow.
Yep.
But
It's
so
amazing.
this new law you're talking about is why we're seeing more Tennessee whiskeys now, and those that aren't, you know, I haven't talked to the audience about this, but Tennessee whiskey is by definition different than bourbon. Of course, that's a 9mm versus 45 caliber debate all day long,
Yes,
right there, right?
absolutely.
So yeah, so we can have that on another show. But how much increase have you seen in the distilleries that have popped up? An increase in Tennessee whiskey versus just bourbon or whiskey makers?
Okay,
in Tennessee.
So in Tennessee itself, when the law was passed in 2009 that allowed distilleries to pop up, they were popping up all over the place, and people were even making moonshine and putting the word Tennessee whiskey on the label. So Jack Daniels got a little bit upset, went to the legislature, kind of flexed their muscle with
Right.
with the legislatures, and basically had Tennessee whiskey defined for the first time in history.
I
So
didn't know that was recent. Okay.
yeah, so 2009 the distillery law passed. 2013 is when the first time by law Tennessee whiskey must go through the Lincoln County process. And it's because Jack Daniels pushed it. But recently, in 2019, there were only about 6 of the 43 distilleries here in the state that actually made a Tennessee whiskey. Excuse me. Now we're creeping up toward over a dozen. So
Okay.
there are a lot of whiskeys made in Tennessee, but only about a dozen Tennessee whiskeys.
So,
And Tennessee,
for the uninitiated here in the audience, the Lincoln County process is where you take essentially bourbon and you then filter it through 12 feet. Is that right?
you could filter it through 2 inches and it would qualify.
Okay, I thought it was
Now-
a specific. Okay,
Now, Jack Daniels filters it through 10 feet.
10 feet.
George Dickel, 7 feet. But there are a lot of places that just fill up a barrel full of charcoal and then strain their whiskey through that charcoal. So the amount of time and the depth of the charcoal is not defined, just that it has to go through that process.
Okay, gotcha. So, anyways, the Lincoln County process, as you just heard us discuss, is where you take the distilled product and you then filter it through X amount of depth of charcoal. And it does it have to be sugar maple?
It does not have to be sugar maple. It does have to be maple, but
Okay.
it does not have to be sugar maple. One of the interesting things about this Lincoln County process is depending on which side of the state line you lay on, people have completely different opinions. If
Sure.
you're from Kentucky and you say, well, you put it through the Lincoln County process, it disqualifies it from being bourbon because it's adding something to what is essentially bourbon.
Right.
And they say it adds a twang or a kind of a licorice taste. While on the other side of the border here in Tennessee, they claim that it purifies the bourbon and only
Right.
has a subtractive process and makes it better. So in Kentucky,
Sure.
they say it makes it worse. In Tennessee, they say it makes it better.
Well, there's a chunk of my audience, at least a few I know, that are fairly well versed in the firearms world, and so I would explain this to them by saying it's the 9 versus 45 debate. You know, there's probably not a right answer. It's all based on your opinion in the end.
I got you.
Yeah. So it's repeal day, and I know this is something you celebrated for years. You've recognized for years, at least. I can't claim I know you celebrate, but so is there something you'd like to leave the audience with about repeal day?
Well, just so that you know, we have a large Christmas party every year, and every other year we actually celebrate repeal day because people get tired of dressing up like gangsters every year. So we do it every other year. And we have different themes in the alternate years, but also during those 2 years, we celebrate by sending a ballot out to all 250 Whiskey University instructors and ask them to vote on their favorite bourbons under 20, under 40, and under 60. Once again, that happens every other year, and we're in the off year right now. But that's one of the big ways that we celebrate. Dress up as gangsters, play a little fun. Last year, I dressed up as Colonel E.H. Taylor, and we just have a good time, have fun of it, and then vote on our favorite bourbons and whiskeys.
Well, hopefully I can be involved in that next year. But,
oh, absolutely, you will.
Yeah. So Fubar asked a question. He said, in Tennessee, doesn't it have to do with the barrel as well? He says, I'm probably mistaken, but there's no specific kind of barrel other than the same requirement for bourbon, correct?
Yes and no. Let's start out with bourbon. By law, by the TTB law, only has to be aged in a new oak container. Here in Tennessee, it is specified by law. It does have to be a barrel. The type of barrel, as long as it's oak and as long as it's new, it's not defined. So
so that also is just like the rest of the definition. As long as it's bourbon, it's just an additional requirement to be Tennessee whiskey.
You're exactly right. And
it would fall under that.
That's exactly right. Most people will argue, like you said, Tennessee whiskey is or isn't bourbon, but it is technically, legally, it is a subset of bourbon.
Yeah.
So
it's a not so distant cousin.
Tom, I want to tell you, I appreciate you having me on. I also wish you a lot of luck with this. Keep me informed as to the progress.
Absolutely.
And for anybody that's interested in learning a great deal about bourbon or whiskey, we teach 110 classes. We teach 5 classes a week on Zoom every week. And we'd love to have you take one class, or as Tom has gone through his bourbon diploma, his associate degree, and his bachelor's degree. Congratulations.
I got both bachelors.
Is there a website?
There is. It is whiskeyuniv.com.
And that's how I found you on, I think it was the Jim Beam website.
Could be. We have a lot of links going back and forth to a lot of discussions.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I don't think I've ever had a chance to talk to you at length like this. When I first got involved, I was really on the border of, is this a scam just to get me to buy Jim Beam? Because the first class you signed me up for, the first one available, was a Jim Beam class. And it just told me, and I found you on the Beam website, and then you tell me to buy all this Beam. And I'm like, I can't tell if this is a scam or not. And then, of course, obviously it's not. But
sure. Jim Beam is only 4 of the 110 classes. It just so happened to be the one that you fell into first.
Yeah. And I'm a Beam fan. So it wasn't like, and that's what I would tell my friends when they're like, wait a minute, isn't this some scam you're doing? And I was like, well, listen, I'm buying Jim Beam. What's the worst this scam can be?
Hey, guys, Fubar's asking if he can get a degree by going to the bar at least once a week. Does that count?
Unfortunately.
Not from Whiskey University, he can't. I'm sure the local bar will write him something on a fancy piece of paper.
Maybe even a napkin.
Hey, Colonel, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate you taking your time out. People, this guy is very, very, very busy. I can vouch for that myself. So thank you very much for being here.
Hey, Tom, thank you very much. Good night.
Yes, sir. Good night. So what do you think? What do you think, Ironton Auditor?
Well, I tell you what, he makes learning about whiskey sound fun to me. I've
Well, trust me, I've been through almost 30 classes. It's very fun.
I'm not normally a drinker. I drink about once every 2 or 3 years, and
Yeah.
usually it's just a beer or so. But as far as like just sipping bourbon, I really like bourbon. It's always been my favorite. I do like different kinds of whiskey, and I haven't tried a bunch, but bourbon's always kind of been my favorite. And I don't know, it just sounds interesting. I'm gonna have to check that out. It sounds fun to do.
It is very interesting, and I'll plug myself here now. Now that he's plugged the overall university, especially for those of you that are local, I teach classes. As a matter of fact, next Monday night I'll be teaching a rye whiskey class. So in America, there's three major whiskeys. I'll give you a quick intro. There's bourbon, which everybody knows. Then Tennessee whiskey, you just learned, is a different definition, and then you have rye whiskey, which is actually where America began making whiskey. Our first whiskeys were all rye, 100%. So and then we as we moved west due to British policies and then later becoming a nation, rye wasn't as plentiful as we moved west, but corn was. And then we started making it with our whiskeys with corn. So anyways, rye whiskey is next Monday night at the Union in Ashland. The Union on Carter is what it's called. It's a event place where you have weddings and things like that. But it's owned by Billy Bear. And I used to, those of you that know me know I used to be director of training for Bear Arms, the indoor range over there. And got to know Billy really well. And when I started, when I got my certification to teach, he owns Shine is just straight distillate, right? So it doesn't fall under any of that FUBAR. It's what happens after it's shine, what you would call shine, that makes it something else. So it's just a well, I mean, shine is made out of corn, so it's just corn whiskey, just plain corn whiskey, not aged, nothing else. So
if you want an old hillbilly trick, if you happen to have some clear corn liquor laying around and you would like bourbon, you take a piece of white oak, you burn it with a torch, you knock the ash off real quick, you shove it down in that jar, put the lid back on it, and wait about 3 months, and you'll have the freshest, most beautiful tasting bourbon you've ever drank.
I can't imagine actually doing these crazy things you're talking about here. But anyways, this class I'm teaching next Monday night, it's sponsored by Sal's Italian Bar and Eatery, which is Billy's restaurant over in Ashland. Great restaurant, by the way. Love it. Great bar, too. And they sponsor the Whiskey University classes that I teach at Billy's event location called the Union on Carter in Ashland, Kentucky. And you can get your tickets on Eventbrite. If anybody wants to know how, just let me know. But in any case, I've got my buddy hanging on. He's been drinking, and it looks like maybe he lit a cigar while he was waiting. So, hey, FUBAR, did I answer your question, by the way? Let me know. And let's see. I'm going to add Joseph in. You ready, Joseph? He's talking. I got it. Can't hear him yet.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Am I here? I'm looking at chat right now.
You're looking at what?
Chat.
Chat. Okay, I thought you said chat. That's a little different.
So I'm slurring my words already. It's okay. It'll be good night.
So Joe is one of my best friends, or not one of. He's one of two. The other guy's kind of in a tie, I guess. So yeah, he's one of two. You know how it is, folks. But anyways, Ironton Auditor, want to introduce you since you're right there on the screen with him.
How you doing today, Joe?
This is Joe. Doing all right. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, buddy, I ain't worth a dime for nothing, but I showed up anyway just because I like to hear myself talk.
Well, hell, we're happy to have you. Thanks for being here.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I heard that apparently this is the buyer of the whiskey we were talking about, right?
Well, I mean, not to brag, but I probably own half of the whiskeys on the shelf behind
you. Own at least half of the value, but not half of the bottles. No.
Yeah,
he buys the expensive stuff. Yeah. No, I got no problem admitting to the truth. Just don't stretch it there, bro. He also stores his cigars at my house, and I think I've only dipped into maybe one or two over the last 4 or 5 years. So I think that's why he keeps it here, is he knows it's safe.
Well, I was thinking that maybe I had to make Joe my friend and tell him I have plenty of shelf space, but maybe I just need to raid Tom's house. Either way, it'd work out, I think.
I mean, you killed two birds with one stone there.
Oh, yeah.
So, Joe, This is repeal day.
Yeah,
you didn't know that till I told you.
I've been listening. I've been following along.
But I mean, you didn't know that till I told you today, did you?
No, I didn't.
No, that's okay, man. It's going to become something now, because we're going to make it that way.
Yeah.
So let's see. Fubar's asking, what of the 3 areas of whiskey will shine fall in? Seeing how? What am I doing? I can have the technology, as Captain Kirk said. What of the 3 areas of whiskey will shine fall in? Seeing how most of the time it is corn base, or would shine be the base of any whiskey? So shine. Okay, so they start off with what's called a mash bill. A mash bill is what we would call the recipe. In your average moonshine that your average guy is going to make anywhere, it's going to be just 100% corn, right? That means it's going to be a corn whiskey no matter what you do with it, because that's the definition because of the recipe. Even if you age it, it's still going to be just corn whiskey. As a matter of fact, right here. So I've got one right here. I got to remember this camera. Everything works backwards. Corn Cracker. Corn Cracker is an inexpensive corn whiskey. Let's see. 80 proof, 40% alcohol, so it's less than moonshine. Certified sour mash. Let's see. Bottled by hand, blah, 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 blah. It's good. It's like, I think it's like 17, 18 bucks. So right around a bottle of Jim Beam. But it's got a distinctive, little bit sweeter flavor because corn is sweet. So that's a corn whiskey, but it's been, as you can see, it's not clear like moonshine. So you've got a corn whiskey there. But yeah, just taking, so rye whiskey has to be at least 51% rye in its mash bill, and bourbon has to be at least 51% corn in its mash bill, and Tennessee whiskey has to be 51% corn at least in its mash bill, and go through the Lincoln County process, as well as some other definitions as well. So I don't believe you could take 100% corn and make it bourbon, but maybe you can. I don't know if it has to have other ingredients or not. So you may be able to take shine and technically make it bourbon, but it has to go in a, as the Colonel just explained to us, a new oak container. Not a stick stuck in a jar there, Ironton auditors. So that wouldn't classify legally as.
Well, I was talking about a hillbilly fix if that's what you got.
Absolutely.
Most people don't have another barrel laying around, but they might have a little clear corn liquor.
Well, exactly. So you've so with the clear. As a matter of fact, I've got some moonshine that I aged in a barrel. I bought a barrel for Joe for Christmas to age some whiskey in, and he said, "Well, just keep it at your house." Well, then I had the opportunity to take some moonshine, and I aged it for Joe as a friend, right? And we've got a bottle of, I guess, what would possibly technically be bourbon that we quote made, sort of, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, we have no idea what the mash bill is on that moonshine.
Bourbon and blended, Chad. Blended means you've taken, like, let's say you've got X amount of bourbon and you got some rye, maybe you got some Canadian whiskey, which that's a different definition, by the way. You take those and you blend them to come out with a flavor profile that you want to create. Yeah. That's blended whiskey. It doesn't any longer fall into a strict category of rye or bourbon or Tennessee. So therefore it becomes blended.
Oh yeah. So you can do a deep dive on basically analyzing whiskey labels on, okay, what does all this advertisement mean to me?
Joe has sat through a few of my whiskey classes with me. He's kind of audited, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so he's heard some of the classes, and yeah, we have that's an extremely expensive paint stripper, just to let you know. As well as I can run my lawnmower way cheaper than corn whiskey. So, although it will work. But yeah, like Joe said, there's not a lot of the class. There's a portion of each class will usually mention labels. And just like anything in modern America, probably forever, but it's more so, I believe, in modern times, marketing has really affected all of our culture. And there's so much deception. And whiskey's no different than other products. You got They just okay. We'll see you later, ZXL. I really appreciate you being here. I really do. So, but yeah. So you'll have lots of what some people would think of as deception, but it's technically not, because the way words are defined, they're telling the truth. And then, of course, sometimes you get their hands slapped by the TTB, which I forgot the exact definition of TTB, but the Colonel mentioned them earlier. They are the government organization that approves labels. So before you can change the label on your liquor or beer, it has to go through the TTB for approval. And this is a great audience for talking about government regs and bureaucracy. So that's something I was thinking we'd probably eventually get to.
Fubar's throwing you a warning. He said, the cops are here. No more talk about shine. Got to be quiet about that.
I know.
We're not divulging our
and
if
I may interrupt for just a moment.
Absolutely, you go right ahead, man.
I've got to go. I have a prior engagement. I have to go meet somebody else on another channel. Thank you for having me here. And I will come back and finish watching, because I'm starting to like this alcohol education. Even though I don't drink, it's very interesting to me.
Well, we're gonna get into, it's gonna get a little pop culture-y, a little history, and a little bit more fun coming up. And yeah, I know this will be something that most people will watch later, but that's cool. We're gonna have a good time either way.
Well, I sure do appreciate you. Thank you, Joe. It was awesome to have met you. And, of course, the Colonel, who's no longer here, but I appreciate meeting him, too. And all you out there in the chat, y'all know how I feel about you. You guys are the show. So thanks for having me, Tom, and everybody have a great night.
Hey, thanks for helping out. Appreciate it. You have a good evening. Let's see. Let's hide. It's just me and you now, Joe.
Yeah, I know.
We've been there a few times. So,
sure have.
So anyways, what are you drinking this fine evening?
Well, I'm drinking some Jim Beam, and I'm mixing it with a little bit of Coke Zero, because that's all I got.
That sounds Larry County as hell.
Well, yeah.
So I haven't mentioned it yet. People have seen me drinking, but I'm drinking, and I thought due to at least some of the content tonight, I'm drinking out of my Second Amendment rocks glass. It's got the Second Amendment engraved all the way around it. Just a little, defiance to the feds. Well, which is for the audience what the Second Amendment is. It's the Second Amendment is the states saying to the feds, this is what you cannot do. That's what the Second Amendment is. A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And it was them telling the feds, this is something you can't touch on, you can't mess with. So anyways, I made an old-fashioned, and we'll talk about an old-fashioned here in a little bit. Actually, I'll go ahead and talk about it now.
Yeah,
during Prohibition, because the liquor that people was getting was such low quality, and it was low quality because could people make good corn whiskey and good moonshine? Absolutely, they could. Like they could before, they can now. Yeah. The problem was, well, I don't know what's a problem, but there was so much money to be made that they were making really bad quality. Kind of like, a little segue to the future of the show here, kind of like how the illegality of modern drugs causes cartels and dealers to just want to cut it down further and further, which makes it more and more dangerous. It is an exact parallel, which we'll talk about later. So you had really poor whiskey. This is where you hear the history of people going blind from bad gin, bathtub gin. I don't know the science there, but it could make people blind, literally. It wasn't the other thing they say will make you blind. It was actually bathtub gin that would do it. Yeah. So because the whiskey was so bad, or you at least assumed that it was low quality, they started mixing cocktails. Now, they didn't invent cocktails in Prohibition era. It's just that most people didn't drink that way. Yes, bootleg gin killed people. It didn't just make you blind. That's right, Fubar. It also would kill people. So yeah, Fubar said, so far I like this channel. You talk about two of my favorite subjects, gun and booze. Well, just hang on, and maybe we'll give you a few more favorite things in life as we go. But yeah, people died from it. So what you had was bartenders and bars of these speakeasies, illegal establishments, creating cocktails to hide the flavors of the bad whiskey, of the bad alcohol, bad liquor. So they invented a lot of cocktails, and one of them that had a resurgence. There's several different histories of the old-fashioned you can look up, And some of them say the old fashioned was renamed in the Prohibition era to refer to older drinks that were more alcohol, because the cocktails of the Prohibition era had gotten so flowery and fruity, trying to cover up bad liquor. So one of the histories of the old fashioned is it was invented to say, hey, this is like the old fashioned drinks when they were strong, like a man, right? So anyways, I'm drinking an old fashioned tonight, and it's Larry County style. I don't have any oranges tonight, so there's no garnish. It's just what it is.
Cool.
So,
back to whiskey, Tom. I hate to interrupt you. You love talking, but I hate to interrupt you. You've got some whiskeys on that shelf back there that were distilled during Prohibition, right? Or at least the distilleries were operating during Prohibition.
Yeah, and I'll tell you straight. You know the way that I remember history and my weaknesses, and one of my weaknesses is remembering the small details. And I can't remember which distilleries it was that made it through Prohibition. No. So what Joe's referred to, I can use this to teach a little history, though, which I can remember. Mm-hmm. And that is that during Prohibition, there were 6 licenses allowed to continue making liquor for medicinal purposes. Yes. And only 4 of those applications were even requested. Not that they were only 4 approved by the feds. They allocated 6 licenses to be given, and only 4 distilleries even applied for it. And I can't remember.
You can't remember why?
Jim Beam was not one.
Yeah.
I know that because a big chunk of their history is how they were ready to go in 180 days after the repeal of Prohibition. They were distilling their first barrel. They recreated everything from scratch, and it was James Beam that did it, the 4th generation at that point that had been distilling. And he said, well, I remade it. I will name it after me. And hence we have Jim Beam. He's the guy that resurrected it.
What about the distillery owned by E.H. Taylor that then changed hands a couple times?
So me and Joe went to Castle and Key, which is something we can talk about in more detail on a different podcast. But Colonel E.H. Taylor is the guy that Colonel said he went to sort of in costume to the repeal party last year. He's also the guy that the Monopoly Man is modeled after, the top hat, monocle wearing kind of dude from the Gilded Age, the Gilded era of American history. And was very influential in politics with presidents, etc. Gigantic influential guy in the whiskey. I think you're right, Fubar. Coors and Budweiser made it through too. I think so. A lot of them just retooled into another product to keep operation going until the repeal happened. So I don't really know the history of those two very much. But anyways, there was 4. I want to say Wild Turkey was one, but I'm not sure if that's right. I'm kind of Heaven Hill. Heaven Hill's one. Yeah. Heaven Hill's one. There we go. Yeah, Heaven Hill's one. God, but I could be wrong. Yeah, so minor details are not how I remember history well. People that know me well know I'm a concept guy. I remember the concepts well and the flow of history. But to remember details like dates of battles and names, I get a little wrapped around the axle.
I wonder if any of the modern big distilleries, so let's bring it into current history. I wonder if any of the modern big distilleries, because I know there were smaller distilleries that participated in the production of like hand sanitizer during COVID, because there was a big boom for that.
Right.
Big supply demand sort of shit. If Tom hasn't explained, I'm a nurse.
I was going to ask you to introduce yourself as you saw fit earlier. Go ahead.
I'm a registered nurse, full disclosure. And I did work through most of COVID. So in nursing homes and mental health hospital. So
right. He works there. He is not a patient.
Shh, they let me out on leave. It's okay. I've got a day pass.
It's like work study, right?
Mm-hmm. You know how they have like career paths in prison? Same thing for mental health, right?
Is that it? Okay.
No,
okay.
not really.
No, not the same thing. By the way, I tried to get our mutual friend on here. I won't throw his name out until he's here, at the moment at least. But tried to get him on, and he's just way too busy. But he would be a great panelist on here as well.
Oh, he would. He's a hoot. He's a person.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And I was thinking we got some more guests, and we'll try to bring on at a later date. Try to get Sereno on here. But
hello, chat. I'm sorry. I'm trying to.
I don't know who's in here anymore. We got 4. So to let you know, and some of the audience that'll see this at a later date, my audience, as I've recreated a new channel here, is a Venn diagram of several communities, and there are other way larger names than me. That's kind of a silly thing to say because it's so much larger, but there's so much other big streamers that are coincidental with this channel's audience that just went live as of 10, and that's why people ditched. Ironton Auditor works with one of those others, and he's going to go help co-host that show. So he stepped in to help me out here for a few, and that's good. He said, "Oh, let's see here."
You're right, Fubar. That is unheard of. No. Well, thank your wife. That is CNA is hard work.
So Fubar, what's her favorite liquor?
They need to pay her more.
What's her favorite liquor, Fubar?
Probably something flavored in the vodka or whiskey department.
That's fine. I mean, it's repeal. It's not bourbon or whiskey specific. So this is repeal day. So we're going to celebrate all of the Liberty expansion that happened on December 5th, 1933. So this is the 89th anniversary, by the way. I've said that once or twice, but I may say it again.
Yeah.
So what are you smoking? She drinks rum.
Oh.
She drinks rum. Not a thing wrong with that.
Rum's tasty.
I've started reading some rum stuff lately that's made me want to go into that world a little bit. Maybe not a lot. A little bit.
You turned me on to a wonderful recipe for an old fashioned made with rum.
Oh, so, absolutely. I tell you what, you talk about how you feel about it while I grab the bottle.
Oh, it is smooth and tasty and amazing and so good. It's just so good. I'm very descriptive with my language.
So here is the whiskey not a whiskey. I'm sorry. Here is the rum that I learned to make a rum old fashioned with at a bar in Columbus when I was there for.
Let's see.
It was a gun-related event that I was at. I'll put it that way. I don't want to throw out the name of why I was there for other reasons. But the rum is Diplomatico. It's the Reserva Exclusiva version. Let's see if I can. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work. But
well, if I'm
it's a flavor, not a flavored rum. It's
you, Fubar, and Legicator.
Yeah, I think. Hey, whatever. That's fine. Baby. That's fine. You know, I know now, Joe, that this stuff is what it is, and then people watch it later, and that's fine. I don't watch a lot of live streams myself, so I get that. You know, people can watch it later, learn a lot, and get involved. So, anyways, that rum, you make it with that instead of a bourbon, and as Joe has testified, it is stellar. It is absolutely stellar way to drink old fashioned. By the way, an old fashioned is basically, at its most basic, an old fashioned is 2 ounces of your liquor, a half ounce of your simple syrup, and then some bitters, which you could do with your regular aromatic bitters, or in this case, I use orange bitters tonight because I don't have an orange. Because the next thing you do is you cut a slice of orange peel off, and then the original way I learned to make it, which sometimes I just don't care about being technical, right? Is I then take a lighter and I burn or I toast the orange rind to express the oils out of it. You twist it a little bit so you get a lot of that orange going up in your nose when you drink, and you throw that in the liquor, and oh my God, it can be that orange with that Diplomatico rum is amazing. So I wanted to go into the next part of what I wanted to talk about, Joe. Let's see if I can figure what you got there.
That's what I'm smoking on tonight, an Aroma de Cuba.
La Roma de Cuba. I've got. I'm smoking on a West Por Dios.
Yeah.
This is a
West Virginia company.
Yeah, no, it's a good stuff, Fubar. She will definitely love that. Yeah, West Virginia Cigar Company. Not a lot of locals know West Virginia now has a cigar company, and the West by God Virginia kind of thing. So they call their cigars West Por Dios. So they give a nod to the cigar world there, a little tip of the hat to the cigar world, and add a little Spanish to the title. So, anyways, but let's see here. I wanted to go. Let's see if I can figure out how to make this work, folks. Don't worry about Fubar. It's not like we're all so.
No, it's all right. I was going to ask you what you were drinking on.
Fubar. Oh, what am I drinking?
I was going.
What are you? Hey, Fubar, what are you drinking?
Yeah.
What are you drinking?
Something.
Or what you said you drank last night? What did you drink last night for the last day, the 89th anniversary of the last day of Prohibition? That's what last night was.
Mm-hmm. He might already be going.
It might take him a while to answer. But okay, so let's see here. I'm
monitoring chat. It's okay. I'm here for it.
Okay, let's see if I can make this happen. I'm still figuring out. Crown Drinker. Canadian whiskey. We didn't talk about that yet.
No, we didn't.
Canadian whiskey is, I tell you what, remind me after this because I'm in the middle of trying to make this happen. Let me know if this, hold on, how's this? I'm still trying to figure out the technical parts, right?
Hey,
so hold on.
This is the
wait a minute. I figured it out. Maybe I didn't figure it out. Dadgummit. I'm trying to figure out how to. I'm trying to figure out the tech here of how to share, and I've done it before.
Yeah.
I just can't remember. Okay. I'm figuring it out. There we go. Now I got to go back and forth on tabs to check it. There we go. Okay, cool. So I won't be able to hear it, but you guys can. It's a short video.
Oh, okay.
The decisive vote of the 36th state against prohibition is happy news for the grain raisers of the United States and for many others throughout the land. With an eye on December 5th, work is being rushed in distilleries and bottling works. Thousands are being called back to work in plants of allied industries. At least 500,000 new jobs are predicted as the result of repeal. From keg and barrel factories, perhaps the most closely allied line,
that's all right, Fubar.
Extend into almost every line of business and commerce. However, everyone's not waiting until December 15th. The lid is off.
More friendlier to you.
Downfall of prohibition celebrated in real old-time hilarity. Yes, and by the renewal of old acquaintances. Hotels and nightclubs report a real pre-war spirit among those revelers. Why? There'll be no more scenes such as this. Barrel after barrel of prize whiskeys destroyed by government agents. It's going to be a cold winter for the barrel busters.
Way to bring everyone down, Tom. Make us watch.
No, this is the end of it. This is celebrating the end of it.
I know, but you had video of them pouring delicious whiskey into the streets.
No, didn't you hear what it said? It says the night break.
I know. I heard what they said.
Yeah, the barrel breakers were just happy.
That's what you had me on here for, right?
We got to take one of these days. Let's see. There we go. So just wanted to throw a little, that was one of those newsreels. They used to have to go to the theater to watch those, and those would show right before the movie, catching it. That was the modern day CNN at the time. And so they were saying, hey, it's over. And it said the part where you saw the barrels, it said the barrel busters, I think it said something about losing sleep or will have a rough night or something like that.
Yeah.
And those are the people that were for prohibition, of course, and lost in their appeal to keep it. And that wasn't an appeal. It was an appeal to the American people. The American people said, screw that. We're passing a new amendment, getting rid of that last stuff that we tried. So Fubar said, I used to drink Jack. Oh, man, that makes me think I should have maybe been able to play a song in here, too. John Party, a country singer I love. His song, Me and Jack.
We don't want to play any copyrighted music, Tom. That'll get you YouTube struck and stuff.
Well, you can do it like a reaction channel where you pause it a lot. But anyways, he said he used to drink Jack. The older he got, didn't get along. So you need to check out that song by John Party, Pardi, Fubar, where he talks about he personifies Jack as if it's his buddy. He talks about it like a friend. And so basically him and Jack met, they got along, they hung out a lot. And then Jack gave him the courage to meet this girl. This girl becomes his wife. She gets pissed because he keeps spending too much time with Jack. And then so she kicks him out. And then because of that, he spends more time with Jack. And next thing you know, he's in jail, but Jack won't bail him out. So then in the end, he says, I should have left him at the liquor store. And then when he got out of jail, he says he went and bought a bottle of Crown. So you should really like that song. It's a great song. But anyways, so one thing I wanted to talk about, I made my old fashioned, Joe, with George Remus.
Oh, okay.
So George Remus was an extremely famous bootlegger. So I'll read to you the back of his bottle. It's not him, but the whiskey named
after a company that's using his name to.
From apothecary to kingpin, George Remus created one of the most intricate, successful bootlegging operations of Prohibition. George Remus bourbon captures the rebellious spirit of that era with a hint of vanilla, a maple aroma, which it absolutely does have, and a sweet yet characteristic rye flavor, perfect for the speakeasy or the liquor
fix my lighting situation.
What's that?
I'm trying to fix my lighting
you look good. You look fine.
I don't know. It feels.
I think your lighting looks a little better than mine, actually.
It's just a regular lamp with a shade. There we go. I feel like I'm not so.
Well, you're using an iPhone too, right? You're using an iPhone, right?
So I'm gonna glow in the dark, but
Yeah, but you're using an iPhone as well.
Well, actually, no. I'm on my iPad. So I closed out my iPhone and switched to my iPad so I can be on my iPhone.
Well, that's why your camera's better. I'm using a 12-year-old laptop camera. So
nice.
Right.
Yeah.
So George Remus, right? Let's talk about who George Remus was, and the next thing I want to show will be even more interesting. So help me out here. What's that?
You need to send me an itinerary for topics you want to discuss. That way I can keep you on track.
You assume that I had one. I mean, I do. It came to fruition like 5 minutes before I went live. So
I'm your friend. I know how your brain works.
You do. So George Remus, I want to talk about him because he's one of the coolest parts in terms of storytelling of the Prohibition era. So this guy was born in Germany, immigrated to America, became a pharmacist by age 20, I believe. Started working as a pharmacist at age 14 in his uncle's pharmacy, and became a pharmacist at 19, and then bought a pharmacy by the time he was 21. He was tired of it by the time he was 24 and just decided, I'll become a lawyer. And then he became a lawyer. And he is the guy that created the temporary insanity defense. So let's see. Remus attended Illinois College of Law and was admitted to the Illinois bar in 1904, specialized in criminal defense, especially murder, and became quite famous, due in large part to the highly publicized William Cheney Ellis murder of 1914. In this case, he pioneered the, quote, transitory insanity defense that evolved into what is now known as temporary insanity. And by 1920, he was making $500K a year, which they say here is approximately $6,700,000 a year by today. Okay. And he was, I haven't calculated the age, but then Prohibition happened, and he started defending criminals.
Yeah.
And he started seeing their bank accounts, these bootleggers that he was defending. And he said, you know what? I think I'm going to get into this. and then he became the most successful bootlegger, or one of the most. According, I'm sure there's a lot of debate that there are. And if anybody's watched the HBO series Boardwalk Empire, in the second season, he comes into the series. And so I'll show you this part, but this part's a little bit of comedy, and we're not going to watch the whole thing. So when you see how long it is, don't fret.
I wouldn't. Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put anything from HBO on.
Oh no, I'm going to. It'll be about 2 minutes. We're good.
All right, bud.
Yep. So if I'm wrong, I'll learn. So we're cool.
Fair enough.
But anyways, he's got this. His character shows up in season 2, and there's like a 5-minute episode that's on YouTube here that I'm going to show. But we're only going to talk about like the first 2 minutes, and you'll get the point. So, but I want to preface it. He was famous for talking in the third person, and Boardwalk Empire accentuates that part. Yeah, I hear you, Fubar. Let's see here. Like I said, we're only going to. It's only 3 minutes long total. We're only going to be about a minute and a half. Then let's see if I can figure out how to make this work again.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to save Tom from.
Oh, I know. He's my really sucky guardian angel.
Yeah, well,
Let's see here.
I can't bail you out of YouTube prison. So
okay, check this out. Watch this. It's pretty funny.
That's so fine. It's so hot. It just come down.
Just gonna be another minute.
What's hurting him now?
Remus is the guy on the left.
Without an earring.
Mr. Torrio is a man beset by convenient maladies.
What's that mean?
Nothing cures him faster than someone else doing his laundry.
I ain't his washerwoman.
Don't take it personally, kid. What do you think George Remus spent 5 years doing?
Come again?
I said, what do you think George Remus was doing for him?
Ain't you George Remus?
Who do you think I was?
You just said it like it was someone else.
This shyster had him on a $500 retainer.
Yeah, see, wasn't even a minute. I'm pretty sure we're good.
It might be okay.
Yeah. So it wasn't even a minute. I knew it was going to be short.
Oh,
but anyways,
Tom, let me segue. I got a segue. So, fun fact about insanity and pleading, insanity in the court system. If you actually use that as a defense, yes, you avoid prison to an extent, but you end up, at least from my very, very limited knowledge of like how stuff works in West Virginia, is you end up serving the full, whatever the full sentence was, the maximum sentence, but you serve it in a mental health facility that's required for like forensic patients.
That sounds sort of reasonable. I mean, I understand why they would pass a law that says, I don't know anything about it, to be honest. That's 50 different sets of laws there. That's
just
thing.
What I've heard.
Right.
You know what? I don't even know if I should repeat it because I don't know how factual it is.
Well, we can talk about that here. So that's why I said I wanted to go to that small clip to add a little flavor to who George Remus was.
Yeah.
But he became, like I said, one of the most famous bootleggers. And then, so here, let me tell you this, because trust me, I'm telling you this for a reason. So in 1899, he married Lillian Clough. Their daughter, born in 1900, was Romola Remus, who became a child actress in silent films. Okay. His daughter was the first Dorothy in the very first version of Wizard of Oz. Wow. And their marriage ended in 1920 when he began an affair with his legal secretary, Augusta Imogene Holmes. She was a young divorced lady with a young daughter named Ruth. They married in Newport, Kentucky in 1920. So fast forward here just a little bit, and I hate it when people say that, but I did it anyways, didn't I? In 1927, she filed for divorce. On the way to court on October 6th, 1927, for the finalization of the divorce, Remus had his driver chase the cab that carried her and her daughter through Eden Park in Cincinnati, forcing it off the road. He then jumped out and fatally shot Imogene in the abdomen in front of the Springhouse gazebo, to the horror of park onlookers. People were watching all this, right? The prosecutor in the case, this kind of gets cool. The tangled web is cool. The prosecutor in this case was a 30-year-old Charles Phelps Taft II, the son of Chief Justice of the United States and former President William Howard Taft, the only president to be president and then go serve on the Supreme Court, and brother of the future Senator Robert Taft. Although he had his last big case against another bootlegger, Taft was seen as a man with a bright political future. The trial made national headlines for a month as Remus defended himself, another crazy element, on the murder charge with the help of a Charles Elston. His first wife and daughter stayed with him during the trial. His stepdaughter then testified against him and depicted him as an abusive husband. He pleaded transitory insanity, which he had pioneered as a defense lawyer, emphasizing his distress at his wife's betrayal. The jury deliberated 19 minutes, not 90, not 9 hours, 19 minutes, and acquitted him.
Jeez.
The state of Ohio committed him to an insane asylum since the jury found him insane. But prosecutors were thwarted by their previous claim, backed up by the prosecution's 3 well-known psychiatrists, that he could be tried for murder because he was not insane. So what happened was the prosecution was saying, you can't find him guilty of temporary insanity because he's not insane. And they had 3 psychiatrists say so. So then after the jury said, we acquit him, it was then used in appeal to get him out of the insane asylum because the prosecution had proved he wasn't insane. So he only served 7 months.
Jeez.
How's that for a story?
Do we know what insane asylum he was stationed in? Probably someplace in
I do not. I'm sure that could be found out, but I didn't have that information. So Legicator had to go at 10:40 a minute ago. He said, have a great stream and a great night.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's what we got here. And then I just wanted to finish. So George Remus is a great, colorful character, a great story out of excuse me. Wow. This is what happens when you drink.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Do a live stream. So
remember, no one has any kind of reputity when they're hiccuping, Tom.
Okay, so what Joe's doing here is whenever we hang out and someone starts hiccuping, is I always say nobody has credibility when they're hiccuping. Right? Everybody looks like a goofball and somebody that's you can't trust or listen to when they're hiccuping. So I wanted to segue from George Remus, a colorful story of the Prohibition era, into other things that we know from the Prohibition era. So, Joe, what can you tell us that still hangs out with us today from the Prohibition era?
That still hangs out with us today? I know you're probably leading me into...
It's still a part of... Well, I mean, you may not even know.
I probably don't.
It's a pop quiz. So we all know, okay, so is Joe in a bar or is that a kick-ass man cave?
I am in what's called a breezeway that's enclosed now. In a house I don't own, so.
That's true.
I'll lift it around, I mean.
Oh, yeah, he just thought, oh, I know where you're at.
Yeah, you know where I'm at.
I know where you're at now. No, that is almost, that's like a man cave that's not a cave.
Yeah, it's man cave.
Yeah.
It's cold as shit in here.
So the number one thing that I know culturally speaking that still resides with us from the Prohibition era would be NASCAR.
Ah, okay. Yeah, because that arrived from people.
Yeah, the bootleggers were trying to design the car. The car was still in its first generation in America at this point.
Yeah.
So it was a brand new thing, and people were learning how to soup them up to be able to outrun the revenuers. They wanted to get away from the government folk, and so they souped up vehicles, and then the bootleggers began to have competitions with each other, and which evolved eventually into what we know as NASCAR today. So you got NASCAR, and let's see. I think I may have written down something else. Let me double check here.
I wish it was a man cave food bar. I wish it was. I'm not that cool. I'll be the first one to tell you.
You're plenty cool enough, Joseph. You're plenty cool enough.
I'm a good friend. I'm not cool.
He's an excellent friend. I wrote it down somewhere, and I don't know where I wrote it down. I don't think I brought the notebook I wrote it in with me. But yeah. We got the rise of the FBI.
Yeah, that's true.
Right here it is. Oh, it's in a different notebook. Yep. So let's see. Bootlegging resulted in NASCAR. We've got cocktails. I already talked about that. Yeah. Sort of the rise of the cocktail.
It also contributed to the rise of organized crime. That still exists today.
However, the repeal, which is what today's about, the repeal got rid of a lot of that organized crime, which is a lesson we really, really need to learn. And then, of course, the FBI. I don't know. I can't say with specificity that the FBI was created because of Prohibition-era crime, but I think it was.
Well, you do.
But its authority was expanded. That I know for certain. Its authority was expanded, and the federal government began to impose a lot of criminal prosecutions that weren't considered federal until the Prohibition era. The Untouchables, right? The Untouchables was an expansion of the FBI. Let's see. He says next year we moving out south. Can't wait to check out some of the bars and drinks. Well,
all depends on how south you moving.
As you say, yeah, where you going? I mean, are we talking Argentina or Florida or Kentucky? I don't know where you're talking.
There's a lot of stuff south, but we don't know where you are right now.
So let us know where you're moving there, Fubar. But
what does Fubar live in the local area?
I don't know. I'm thinking he's a local with most of the crowd that I've inherited. Sort of. Let's see. The RICO Act. Yep, absolutely. We got the RICO Act. Like I said, expansion of federal power, expansion of. So here's the lesson, and this is more of my wheelhouse. Our founders said a system of liberty, any system of liberty, ours or anyone else's, is only fit for a virtuous, is what one founder called it. A moral people is what another founder called it. Moving to North Carolina. Oh, you live in Wyoming. You're going to the land, from the land of the free, dude. Okay, well, that's another discussion, I guess. But okay, fair enough. I lived in North Carolina for 13 years. Great state. Absolutely loved it there. But it's got its issues too. Like anywhere humans happen to be, have got serious issues. But
I'll be right back. I'm gonna close this window.
So what happens is whenever a people can't govern themselves, and when I say themselves, I don't mean as a group of people. I mean me. When I can't govern me and I commit crime that actually affects other people in a much obviously direct way, then any government, then will over time step in to control me. And that's how governments gain more and more power. And that's why our founders said a system like ours is only suitable for a virtuous or a moral people. And some even said, a Christian people. There's different varieties of how they said that, but that's the point they're making, is that when there is a group of people that mostly govern themselves, they mostly agree on morals, what's right, what's wrong, and they enforce that amongst themselves and on themselves individually, then you don't need a lot of government. And the more corrupt you get, the more sinful you get, the more abusive you get to your fellow human, the more government grows. And so prohibition is a great example of the government come in and tried to say, well, at the time they wouldn't have said victimless because they were tying it to a lot of domestic abuse and a lot of other things. So they would have said it wasn't victimless. But I think today we'd say, it's wives aren't stuck with abusive husbands like they were in 1917. So now it would be more of a victimless crime being too far into alcohol or an alcoholic than it would have been at the time. So government stepped in with an amendment and said, we're going to make that illegal. And then we saw the error of those ways. That kind of law just does not work. And what you had instead was, instead of money and power through money, I don't mean political power, but the power you get just from being rich and being successful, instead of that being a distillery or a brewery, that got transferred straight into bootleggers and guys like George Remus. And so you ended up with Al Capone's. So you end up with crime because they're already outside the rules. So they're not playing by any rules. So they don't mind murdering. They don't mind doing all kinds of things that keep that power, because their power, it flows from the illegality. And that's why the repeal is so important in American history and in our culture, is it shows the error of those ways, which we have not learned. Which takes me to the end of the show. Timing is about right. We're 8 minutes to 11. I'd like to finish at 11. So that's pretty good. Yeah. So one thing I want to say is our Constitution works. The people at the time, by supposedly a majority, said, we want to illegalize alcohol. And they did. And they lived with that for a few years. They saw the error of their ways as an overall populace, and they repealed it. Our Constitution works when it's used properly. We can try things like illegalizing abortion. We can try things like legalizing abortion. We can do those things, and as a society, we can correct those. Some think it would be a mistake to go one way. Some think it's a mistake to go back the other way, just like they did in Prohibition. You had people that would not celebrate the end of Prohibition. But I think as you look back on it 89 years later, we can see how that power flowed politically and in other ways into he who will not be named. Are we talking Sovereign? The other guy that hangs out in chats with Chad and has been on the one live stream I did before this one. Is that who you're talking about, Fubar? Sovereign?
He's trying not to name him, Tom.
I know he is, but I'm we
don't want to call nobody out.
Well, listen, if he's obviously he's telling the truth, I believe. And so this person would, no, Trump doesn't want to suspend this Constitution. Hold on. I'm not going to segue very far. I'm not going to rabbit trail very far here. But the latest quotes I've heard from Trump, he does not want to suspend the Constitution any more than Abraham Lincoln did. And that's a whole nother history lesson there. Lincoln also did some things that were considered very unconstitutional and are still looked at today for very limited time, specific purposes. And don't get me wrong, Trump said some things absolutely entirely anti-constitutional when the red flag issue came up. He said, well, let's just take the guns first and we'll do due process later. And then the very next day, he's like, I kind of made a mistake there. And so he had somebody get with him and explain. He's not a historian. He's not a lawyer, and he's not a politician. And I'm not a Trumpist. I'm not a Trump follower. I'm not a Trump aficionado. Any of the connoisseur, any of those words you want to associate, I respect a lot that the man did. I respect a lot that he has done when it comes to the actual doing. When it comes to his personality, I find him more funny than anything else. But when it came to what he did, not the goofy things he may say occasionally, I'm a fairly big supporter of what he actually did. I don't care what they look like anymore. I don't care what they talk like anymore. I don't care the silliness they say. What I care about is what they do. And And that's how he won me over. I was a gigantic Cruz supporter, still am, still love Ted Cruz to death. Like 95% of the time, I'm exactly parallel with Ted Cruz. So I was not a Trump supporter for quite some time. He slowly won me over by what he actually did. And so I hear what you're saying, Fubar. You're not wrong. He did say some crazy stuff recently about the election. But I will say this in defense, just as a theoretical mind game or mind exercise. If you truly believe, yeah, he wanted to suspend part of it so he could get back in. Well, right. But I mean, I can't say, as a constitutional guy, I can't say he's entirely wrong here. Let's suppose, okay, forget Trump for a second. Let's suppose we discover we cannot have a real election anymore. You can't just keep having fake elections or bad elections to try to correct that problem. You've got to take drastic measures. So once again, I'm not saying what those measures need to be, but acting like what he said is entirely out of line, I think, is also not a fair assessment, in my opinion. So, and yeah, he's fun to watch. That's for sure. He's entertaining. I love how he blows up his opponents, how they just go apoplectic and cannot control themselves anymore. That's some of the funnest stuff that I like about him. But the last thing I wanted to end on, we got a couple minutes if I want to finish on time. The last thing I wanted to end on is the war on drugs. If you watch Ken Burns' documentary, it's a 3-part documentary. The first part is before Prohibition, all the arguments and the politics that led to it. The second episode is during Prohibition, what happened during. The third episode is after the repeal, getting the repeal done and what happened after. If you watch those and keep in your mind the war on drugs that we've had since at least I think the 80s, some calculated to the 70s. Well, yeah, Tammany Hall, sure. That's some of the most corrupt part of American history there is. But if you go back to, if you look at Prohibition and the whole time you watch that documentary, you listen in your head with a mind toward the war on drugs, it is so parallel, it's insane. Like I said, we didn't learn that lesson. Cartels have the power they have because we make their product illegal. And I'm not one of these guys that say, well, let's just legalize it and tax the hell out of it. No, I don't want the government involved at all. I don't say tax the hell out of it. I'm not a pot smoker. I've never done an illegal drug. Don't plan on doing an illegal drug. I would talk everybody I could out of doing an illegal drug. However, pot's an easy example. I should be able to grow out in my yard like an ear of corn, like a daisy. I should be able to grow it, use it, sell it, trade it, do whatever I want with zero government influence whatsoever, like an ear of corn grown by anybody in a backyard garden. Now, if you're going to go industrial, like gigantic farms, okay, that's another story. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just the most basic legality. That's the easiest one to explain. I'm not going to get into the specifics on cocaine and amphetamines and all these because they all have properties that we could discuss a little bit. But pot's an easy example. Like I said, never done it. Actually hate pot culture. I understand people that use it medicinally and don't run their whole lives around it. But the way people turn their whole lives to revolve around the fact that they use pot, I find pretty disgusting. And I know that's probably going to piss some people off, but so be it. However, I'm also the guy that would be in their corner for a federal constitutional amendment, as well as every state that's willing to do it, saying, fill in the blank, however you would have to define it legally, shall be legal, period. That's it. Nothing more complicated than that. Because we give the criminals the power. We also create, obviously, part of this, what I just said, is the creation of black markets. We create an insane amount of burden on our law enforcement. We risk their lives in goofy ways. We also justify their over-militarization. We justify their budgets. We create drug courts. I mean, think about that for a second. We have a specific set of courts just for dealing with this one issue. We're fighting people, risking guys like Chad's life to stop people from doing what they will fight us to keep doing to themselves. Just think about how silly that is. We're so involved in just letting it happen that we just accept it as normal and let it go. It's not normal. It's not normal for us to. Listen, I'm not for a lot of government spending and a lot of government involvement. However, if they said, you know what, we're going to legalize it, and then we're going to take all the money that we used in law enforcement and justice systems and the penal system, we're now going to transfer that into voluntary, requested, not solicited to them, requested rehab. Let's put the money into that. I would much rather at least know it's being spent that way than risking law enforcement lives and correction officers' lives. Yeah, okay, yeah. He said the same thing. They should legalize pot. I do not partake. And yes, pot activists, excuse me, I'm hiccuping again. They get on my last nerve. Yeah, it's because there's something about pot, and if they want to do it to themselves, I'm for liberty. You want to do that to yourself, do it. Yeah, the people that got to have a tattoo of it, and they wear socks that have pot on them, and they got to have a T-shirt, and every time the clock hits 4:20, they giggle a little bit. You know, that kind of stuff just literally disgusts me. I can't stand pot culture, but the pot itself is another story. But so, anyways, legalize it, and we can discuss other drugs. In my opinion, as a non-scientist, non-doctor, non-rehab specialist, non-ever using any drug guy, my opinion is as long as it is not hallucinogenic, have at it. Have at it, man. If you want to tear your life up, knock yourself out. I'm tired of risking everyone else's life around you, filling up our prisons, filling up our courts, risking law enforcement lives, not to mention all the budget that it takes out of everyone's taxpayer dollars to fund everything I just mentioned, to try to keep you from doing what you will then fight us to keep doing. It's just silly. If we were winning the war on drugs, I may have an entirely different. Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's another history lesson there. When we illegalize,
I agree.
Yeah, that's. Yeah. Did you realize in the rabbit trail? And I'll come right back. Do you realize you never heard of the homeless problem of the 1950s? Why? Because we had mental hospitals. Most homelessness, well over 90%, is all about mental illness. And because we are now handicapped as a society on what we're allowed to do for and with those people, we now have the homeless issue. So anyways, wanted to wrap it up with a modern day take on it. The war on drugs that we currently do is no different than Prohibition era, except there's no amendment we can repeal.
Yeah,
they did. The people in power learned that lesson. Let's not do an amendment. Let's just pass some laws. And they passed the laws. You got the war on drugs, and now we got the problems of the war on drugs. Listen, as long as humans are involved, there's going to be problems. The question is, how can you provide the most liberty while you try to deal with humanity? And that's what our founders set up with the Constitution. Just enough government and restraint to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, while setting up a system to, hopefully encapsulate it like a fence, protect that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness from the forces that would destroy it. And of course, government is its own worst enemy, and they will always find ways to go outside of their restrictions. But in any case, Fubar, dude, thanks for hanging out the whole time.
Thank you so much. Next time,
I really appreciate it.
Next time, you need to invite your friends, Bohica, Snafu, AWOL.
Joe going
name out some other military acronyms.
Oh, Fubar, thanks a lot. Tell Wyoming I said hi. Never been there, but I'd love to see it. Mm-hmm. And we will we'll catch you later, and I'll see you backstage in a minute, Joe. Thanks for anyone that watched. Please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Hit it again for the notification so you see when I'm going to do it again. Otherwise, I appreciate anybody that spent any time on the channel today. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for watching.